Tolu, please. I'm begging you, come back home. I know I was wrong.
Isn't that the same woman he once said was too fat to be his wife?
I was blind. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me.
The day you rejected me, I thought nobody would ever want me. But today, I finally know my worth.
How did the woman everyone mocked become the woman everyone wanted? And why was the man who rejected her now begging for another chance? Let's find out. Everyone in Ayatoro village knew that Bayo married Tolu because of his late father's dying wish. Tolu was kind, respectful, hardworking, and came from a humble family that everyone admired. But she was a plus-sized woman. Since childhood, she had always been mocked for her body. The village children called her Big Yam. Women whispered that she would never find a husband. And even during festivals, she noticed how people stared before looking away with pity. She had learned to smile through the pain because her mother always told her, a beautiful heart will one day meet beautiful eyes. Tolu believed those words with all her heart, but after marrying Bayo, she slowly began to wonder if her mother had only said them to comfort her. For the first few months of their marriage, Bayo acted like a responsible husband whenever people were watching. He escorted her to church, sat beside her during village meetings, and greeted everyone with a smile. But once they returned home and the door closed behind them, his entire attitude changed. He barely looked at her. If she served food, he complained she had cooked too much. If she laughed, he said her voice was too loud. If she walked beside him, he deliberately increased his pace until she struggled to keep up. Tolu noticed every little insult, but she convinced herself that marriage requires patience. Every evening she prepared his favorite meals, washed his clothes before sunrise, and prayed that one day love would grow inside his heart. The real humiliation came during the New Yam festival. The entire village gathered in colorful attire while drummers entertained the crowd. Married couples were expected to dance together before the elders as a symbol of unity. When the master of ceremony called Bayo and Tolu forward, everyone clapped. Tolu smiled shyly and stretched out her hand toward her husband. Instead of holding it, Bayo stepped backward. "I can't dance," he muttered. The crowd laughed lightly, thinking he was joking. An elder smiled. "Young man, your wife is waiting." Bayo forced out a smile, but irritation flashed across his face.
Must I dance? Look at her. She can't even move fast enough.
Tolu's smile disappeared. One woman whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Maybe he's embarrassed." Another answered, "Can you blame him?" Someone else laughed. Bayo turned and walked away, leaving Tolu standing alone before the entire village. She remained frozen for several seconds before quietly lowering her head and walking back to her seat while pretending not to hear the mocking voices around her. That night, she cried silently into her wrapper so Bayo would not hear her. He, meanwhile, slept peacefully as though nothing had happened. Days turned into months and Bayo's cruelty only grew worse. Whenever they visited the market together, he deliberately walked several steps ahead. If another man greeted Tolu politely, Bayo accused her of trying to attract attention.
Maybe if you lost some weight, people would stop staring.
I never asked anyone to stare.
You don't have to ask. Your size does the talking.
She would lower her eyes and continue walking. The irony was that Tolu hardly ate much. She woke before dawn, fetched water from the stream, swept the compound, cooked, farmed beside other women, returned home to prepare dinner, and still found strength to care for Bayo. Her body had simply always been fuller than most women in the village. One evening, Bayo invited 3 friends to the house without informing her. Tolu quickly prepared pounded yam and egusi soup despite the short notice. The visitors praised the delicious meal repeatedly.
Bayo, your wife can cook. You're lucky. The only thing she's truly gifted at is knowing food. No wonder.
Tolu quietly carried the empty plates into the kitchen. Once she was alone, tears rolled freely down her cheeks, dripping into the washing bowl. She scrubbed the plates while trying not to make a sound. Later that night, she asked gently, "Did I offend you?" Bayo looked confused. "When? When you insulted me before your friends." He shrugged carelessly. "It was only a joke. It hurt me." "You women are too emotional." She remained silent. "If you don't like hearing it, then change." "How?" "Lose weight." "I've tried." "Try harder." Those words echoed in her heart for days. Determined to save her marriage, Tolu began waking even earlier. She reduced her meals, exercised around the compound before sunrise, worked longer hours on the farm, and drank herbal mixtures recommended by elderly women. Weeks passed. Nothing changed. Instead, she became weak. One afternoon, she collapsed while carrying firewood home. The women rushed to help her. "Tolu," one cried. She slowly regained consciousness. An elderly widow named Mama Sade held her hand. "My daughter, who are you trying to please?" Tolu forced a weak smile. "My husband." Mama Sade sighed deeply. A woman who destroys herself trying to fit into another person's eyes may one day forget how to see herself. Those words settled heavily inside Tolu's heart. When she returned home exhausted, hoping Bayo would show concern, he barely glanced at her. "You should stop embarrassing yourself," he said. "I fainted." "You probably stood too close to the cooking pot." She stared at him. That was the first night Tolu prayed a different prayer. Not for Bayo to love her, but for God to help her remember that she was still worthy of love, even if it never came from her husband. She had no idea that this quiet prayer would become the beginning of a transformation that would shake not only her marriage, but the entire village. The same people who mocked her would soon be fighting for a chance to stand beside her, and the man who rejected her in public would discover that regret is a punishment no one can escape. The morning after Tolu whispered that desperate prayer, she woke before the first cock crowed, as she always did. For a few moments, she lay on her mat staring at the ceiling, wondering why she still felt the need to fight for a marriage that had long stopped feeling like one. She listened to Bayo snoring beside her and remembered every insult he had thrown at her over the past 3 years. She remembered the New Yam festival where he left her standing alone before the whole village. She remembered washing plates while his friends laughed at jokes made about her body. She remembered collapsing on the road with firewood on her head while the women of the village rushed to save her. Yet the man who had promised before God to love and protect her had not even asked whether she was alive. Something inside her shifted. It was not anger. It was not revenge. It was simply exhaustion. She rose quietly, tied her wrapper around her waist, prepared breakfast as usual, placed Bayo's meal on the table, and left for the farm without waking him. As the weeks passed, the women in the cooperative began noticing that Tolu was no longer the quiet woman who apologized for existing. She still smiled. She still greeted everyone with respect, but she no longer laughed at jokes meant to humiliate her, nor did she explain herself whenever someone commented on her size. If anyone mocked her, she simply continued with her work as though their words had no power over her. Mama Sade watched this change with satisfaction. One afternoon, she handed Tolu a small basket filled with fresh vegetables. "Take these to the city market tomorrow," she said. "People there pay better than the traders here. You have good hands. Your vegetables are always fresh. Stop selling yourself short." Tolu hesitated. "I've never sold in the city." Mama Sade smiled. "Then tomorrow will be your first day." One Saturday afternoon, the village square became unusually lively. A wealthy businessman from Ibadan had come to inspect farmland nearby, and after completing his work, he stopped at Tolu's vegetable stand to buy produce for his family. As she weighed the vegetables, he smiled warmly. Madam, your customer service is excellent. I have visited many markets, but I have rarely met someone this honest. You even removed the spoiled tomatoes yourself before I noticed them. Tolu smiled. If I wouldn't serve it to my family, I shouldn't sell it to yours. The man laughed with genuine admiration. People like you are becoming rare. Several women nearby exchanged surprised glances. They had never seen such an influential man speak so respectfully to Tolu. The businessman returned the following week, then again the week after. Soon, people began whispering, "He's always buying from Madame Tolu. Perhaps he wants to partner with her. Maybe he likes her." Tolu ignored the gossip completely. To her, he was simply another customer. But Bayo heard every rumor. One evening, as she entered the compound carrying empty baskets, he confronted her before she could even greet him.
So this is what you've become?
What do you mean?
You've started entertaining rich men now?
He's a customer.
He seems to buy vegetables every week.
No, Bayo. I think you're looking for someone to blame because your own life isn't moving the way you expected.
The words landed like a slap. For several seconds, he simply stared at her. This was the same woman who once apologized even when she had done nothing wrong. Now she had looked him in the eyes without fear. That night, Bayo could not sleep. He kept remembering how confidently she had spoken. He remembered how beautiful her smile looked these days. Not because her body had changed, it hadn't, but because the sadness that had always weighed down her face had disappeared. For the first time since their marriage, he actually looked at his wife instead of merely seeing her size. A month later, the local government announced a business awards ceremony to recognize outstanding entrepreneurs from nearby communities. Nobody in Ayetoro expected Tolu's name to be mentioned. On the evening of the ceremony, villagers gathered around a large television outside the community hall to watch the event. When the presenter opened the envelope and announced, "This year's Agricultural Excellence Award goes to Mrs. Tolulokbe Adebayo of Ayetoro village," the entire crowd erupted in shock. "There must be another Tulu," someone muttered, but there wasn't. It was their Tulu. The same woman people had laughed at. The same woman whose husband had abandoned her on the dance floor. As she walked onto the stage, the audience rose to applaud. She accepted the award with tears in her eyes and thanked every woman who had walked beside her. She never mentioned Bayo. She never mentioned the insults. She never mentioned the humiliation. She simply smiled and dedicated the award to every person who has ever been made to feel that they were not enough. Back in the village, silence filled the square. Nobody laughed anymore. The women who had mocked her lowered their heads. The men who once ignored her suddenly spoke of her beauty, her grace, and her intelligence. Even unmarried chief's sons from neighboring villages began asking quietly, "Is it true her marriage isn't happy?" Bayo felt something cold settle in his chest. For the first time in his life, he realized that the woman he had spent years trying to hide had become the woman everyone now admired. And for the first time, he was afraid someone else might see the value he had spent years throwing away. But what he did not know was that someone already had.
The rumors reached Bayo long before the truth did. At first, he dismissed them as idle gossip. The chairman's younger brother was asking about Tolu. A widowed school proprietor from the next town has been buying vegetables from her every week. That businessman from Ibadan wants to invest in her farm. Every conversation seemed to begin and end with his wife's name. The same men who once laughed when he mocked her now spoke of her with admiration. She has a good head on her shoulders. She treats people with respect. She carries herself with dignity. Bayo forced himself to laugh whenever these conversations came up, but inside him, something was breaking. For years, he had convinced himself that Tolu was lucky to have him. Now, for the first time, he began to wonder if he had been the fortunate one all along. He started doing things he had never done before. He waited for her to return from the market. He asked if she had eaten. He even complimented her cooking one evening. Tolu noticed every change, but she also noticed that none of it came with an apology. He wanted the comfort of the marriage back without acknowledging the wounds he had inflicted.
One night, as they sat outside after dinner, Bayo cleared his throat awkwardly.
You've really done well for yourself.
Thank you.
You know, I've always believed in you.
Bayo, please don't rewrite our history. I survived it. I remember it.
He lowered his head because there was nothing he could say that would make those words untrue. A few days later, the village prepared for another New Yam festival, the very celebration where Bayo had humiliated his wife before everyone 3 years earlier. This time, things were different. The village council invited Tolu as the guest of honor because of the jobs she had created for local women. As she arrived wearing a beautifully tailored wine-colored Ankara gown, women surrounded her with greetings while children ran to hug her. Even the elders stood to welcome her. Bayo walked behind her, but for once, no one paid attention to him. They wanted to speak with Tolu. They wanted advice about farming, business, and scholarships she had begun sponsoring for girls in the village. Bayo stood quietly, realizing he had become invisible beside the woman he had once tried so hard to hide. When it was time for the traditional couples dance, the master of ceremony smiled broadly. Today, he announced, we would like our distinguished guest, Madame Tolu, and her husband to open the celebration. The crowd applauded loudly. Every eye turned toward them. Bayo immediately stretched out his hand. 3 years earlier, this was the moment he had rejected her before the entire village. Now he smiled nervously, hoping she would save him from embarrassment. Tolu looked at his hand. Then she looked into his eyes.
Bayo, do you remember the last time we stood here?
I was foolish.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
The words were barely audible. She continued looking at him, searching his face as though trying to decide whether the apology came from his heart or from fear of public shame. Around them, the villagers waited patiently, unaware of the conversation taking place. Finally, she spoke. I prayed every night for 3 years to hear those words. A tear rolled down Bayo's cheek. I know. I cried myself to sleep while you called my pain a joke. I know. You made me believe I wasn't enough. I know. You only found your voice after other people began to see my value. He closed his eyes because she was right. Every single word. She gently folded his outstretched hand back toward him. I'm grateful for your apology, she said. It has healed something inside me. Hope flickered across his face. Then she quietly added, but healing does not always mean returning. The hope disappeared. Without another word, Tolu stepped away from him and walked toward the microphone placed at the center of the square. The master of ceremony looked confused, but she smiled reassuringly before addressing the crowd. My fathers, my mothers, my brothers and my sisters. 3 years ago, I stood in this same square and felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. Not because of my body, but because I believed another person's opinion was worth more than my own. I went home that day thinking I needed to become someone else before I deserved love. I nearly destroyed myself chasing acceptance from someone who had already decided not to give it. The crowd became completely silent. But life has taught me something. The people who truly love you will never ask you to hate yourself first. The day I stopped trying to earn respect from those determined to withhold it was the day my life began to change. Many women in the crowd wiped tears from their eyes. Even some of the men lowered their heads. Tolu turned away from the microphone and faced Bayo directly. I forgive you. He burst into tears. I forgive every insult. His shoulders shook uncontrollably. I forgive every humiliation. He covered his face with both hands. I also forgive myself for staying in a place where I was never appreciated. She removed the simple wedding ring from her finger. For several moments, she held it in her palm. Then she gently placed it in Bayo's hand. The entire village gasped. There are marriages that survive betrayal. There are marriages that survive poverty. But no marriage survives when one person spends years convincing the other they are unworthy of being loved. No one spoke. No drum sounded. Even the wind seemed to pause.
Months later, the customary divorce was peacefully completed with both families present. There was no shouting, no fighting, and no bitterness. Tolu insisted on living with nothing except the belongings she had brought into the marriage. "Everything I have now," she told the elders, "I can build again." She moved into a larger farmhouse outside the village, expanded her agricultural business across the state, and established a foundation that provided startup funds for widows and abandoned women. Her story spread far beyond Ayetoro. Newspapers wrote about her. Young women traveled to hear her speak, not because she had become the richest woman around, but because she had become a living proof that a person's worth is not determined by the eyes that refuse to see it. As for Bayo, he remained in the village. Every year, when the New Yam Festival returned, he watched couples dance together in the same square where he had once rejected the woman who loved him without conditions. People no longer remembered him as the handsome young man everyone admired. They remembered him as the husband who threw away a priceless treasure because he judged her by her appearance instead of her character.
Sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would pass Tolu's foundation and see women laughing as they learned new skills under her guidance. She greeted him politely whenever their paths crossed. There was no hatred left between them, only a peace that he would never again be part of. And that became the greatest punishment of all. Not that another man took the woman he rejected, but that she finally discovered she never needed a man to prove she was worthy of being wanted.